Have you ever looked at your own life and wondered why some people seem naturally disciplined while others constantly struggle just to stay consistent for a few days? Maybe you promised yourself you would wake up early, study harder, exercise more, or stop wasting time scrolling through your phone. But somehow after a few days, the plan collapses. Motivation fades, routines break, and you find yourself back in the same cycle again. Most people interpret this as a personal failure. They believe discipline is something that strong people possess and weak people lack. According to that belief, if you cannot stay consistent, it simply means you are lazy or not determined enough. But what if that entire idea is wrong? What if the real problem was never your character, your intelligence, or your willpower? What if the problem was the way your brain is designed? The truth is far more surprising than most people realize. The human brain did not evolve to pursue long-term goals, ambitious plans, or heroic self-control. It evolved for one primary purpose: survival. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived in harsh environments where resources were limited and danger was constant. In that world, the brain developed one main strategy: conserve energy whenever possible and pursue immediate rewards when they appear. Eating food immediately was safer than saving it for later. Resting instead of unnecessary movement conserved energy for emergencies. Avoiding difficult tasks reduced risk and fatigue. In other words, the brain was optimized for short-term efficiency, not long-term ambition. And that ancient biological programming still exists inside you today. When you decide to wake up early and go to the gym, your brain does not interpret that as a noble act of self-improvement. Instead, it perceives unnecessary effort and energy loss. When you sit down to study or work on a challenging project, your brain quietly suggests something easier, maybe checking your phone for a moment or opening social media. Why? Because those options offer faster rewards with almost no effort. This is not a defect in your character. It is simply biology operating exactly as it was designed. The real problem appears when this ancient brain collides with modern expectations. Today's world demands something completely different from what the brain evolved for. We are expected to be productive, focused, disciplined, and consistent for years in pursuit of goals that might only pay off in the distant future. Education requires years of study before any reward appears. Careers demand long hours of effort before success arrives. Fitness requires weeks or months of training before visible results emerge. From the brain's perspective, this system makes very little sense. And that is where the internal conflict begins. On one side, you have a brain that seeks comfort, efficiency, and immediate pleasure. On the other side, you have a society that demands patience, effort, and long-term thinking. When people try to solve this conflict, they usually rely on one strategy: willpower. They push themselves harder. They repeat motivational quotes. They promise to stay stronger next time, but this strategy rarely works for long. Trying to overpower millions of years of biological programming using pure willpower is like trying to stop a river with your hands. For a short moment you might succeed, but eventually the current wins. That is why motivation always fades. However, there is an important insight that changes everything. Real discipline is not created through force. It is created through design. People who appear extremely disciplined are not necessarily stronger, smarter, or more motivated than everyone else. What they often have is something much more powerful. They have systems. Instead of constantly fighting their brain, they arrange their environment so that the right behavior becomes easier and the wrong behavior becomes harder. This simple shift changes the entire game. Think about your daily surroundings for a moment. Your behavior is constantly influenced by what is closest, easiest, and most visible. If your phone is always within reach, checking it becomes automatic. If unhealthy snacks are on the table, eating them requires almost no effort. If your study materials are hidden in a bag while entertainment is one click away, distraction becomes the default choice. In this situation, the brain is not choosing between good and bad, it is choosing between easy and difficult. And it will almost always select the easier path. This idea is often described as choice architecture. It means the structure of your environment quietly shapes your decisions before you even realize it. For example, researchers have observed that simply placing healthier food at eye level in cafeterias significantly increases the number of people who choose it. No motivational speech is required. No rule is enforced. The environment itself guides the decision. The same principle can transform your habits. If you want to read more, leave the book somewhere visible, perhaps on your pillow or desk. If you want to reduce phone usage, disable notifications, or keep the device in another room. If you plan to exercise in the morning, prepare your clothes and shoes before going to sleep. These small adjustments may seem trivial, but they drastically reduce the effort required to start the behavior. And starting is the most difficult part. Once an action begins, momentum often carries it forward. Another powerful technique that builds on this idea is called habit stacking. The brain naturally operates through patterns and routines. Many behaviors already happen automatically in your day. You brush your teeth after waking up. You check messages after picking up your phone. You prepare food when you enter the kitchen. Habit stacking uses these existing routines as anchors for new behaviors. Instead of trying to create a completely new habit from nothing, you attach it to an existing one. For example, after brushing your teeth, you might spend 2 minutes stretching. After making coffee, you read 1 page of a book. After sitting at your desk, you write a few lines in a journal. Because the original habit already exists, the new action becomes easier to integrate. You are essentially borrowing the brain's automatic patterns and expanding them. Over time, these tiny behaviors connect into chains. At first they appear insignificant, but when repeated daily, they accumulate into powerful routines that shape your entire lifestyle. Many people struggle not because they lack effort, but because their systems are poorly designed. This misunderstanding also explains procrastination. People often treat procrastination as laziness or weakness. They criticize themselves for not taking action, but procrastination is rarely about character. It is usually a sign that the task is poorly structured. If an action feels confusing, overwhelming, or unrewarding, the brain naturally postpones it. Imagine a student who wants to study every evening but faces several obstacles. Their desk is cluttered. The television is playing nearby. The study materials are buried inside a bag. The plan is to study for an entire hour without breaks. Under those conditions, opening social media suddenly becomes far more attractive. But if the same task is redesigned, the outcome changes dramatically. The books are already open on the desk. The goal is only 5 minutes of study at first. The environment is quiet. After finishing, the student marks progress on a visible tracker. Now the habit feels obvious, manageable, and satisfying. Behavioral scientists often summarize this process through 4 simple principles. A habit must be visible enough to remind you to start it. It must feel appealing enough to attract your attention. It must be simple enough to begin without resistance. And it must provide some sense of reward once completed. When these conditions exist, habits become far easier to maintain. There is also another myth that prevents many people from progressing. Modern productivity culture often claims that you must love the process in order to succeed. You hear phrases like fall in love with the journey or do what you love and you'll never work a day. While inspiring, this idea can be misleading. The truth is that many successful people do not enjoy every step of their routines. They do not wake up excited to complete every difficult task. What they have built is structure. They create systems that ensure the right actions happen, even on days when motivation is absent. Consider the example of someone who wants to run every morning. If they rely purely on desire, the plan will fail most days. Sleep will feel more comfortable, and excuses will appear easily. But if the system changes, the outcome changes. Running shoes are placed beside the bed. The alarm is across the room. Music starts playing automatically. A friend is waiting outside to run together. Suddenly, the behavior becomes easier to execute than to avoid. The decision is made before the brain has time to negotiate. That is the real power of systems. They remove the need for constant motivation. Over time, something even deeper begins to happen. Your identity starts to shift. Every small action becomes evidence of the kind of person you believe yourself to be. When you read regularly, you begin to see yourself as a reader. When you exercise consistently, you begin to see yourself as someone who takes care of their body. When you show up to work on your goals daily, even for a few minutes, you start believing you are disciplined. Identity shapes behavior, and behavior reinforces identity. It becomes a cycle. Instead of asking, how can I force myself to achieve this goal? A more powerful question appears. What would a person like me do in this situation? Every small action becomes a vote for the person you want to become. At first, these votes feel small. But over months and years, they accumulate into a completely different life. Eventually, discipline no longer feels like a struggle. It simply becomes part of who you are. And that realization reveals something surprising. Discipline was never the real goal. It was only the side effect of the systems you built, the environment you designed, and the identity you chose to reinforce every day. But here's the question that changes everything. If your habits shape your identity and your identity shapes your future, what kind of person are your daily actions quietly training you to become right now?